Okay, let's go over raw milk, right? Let's go over this video. Now, I want to bring up one key point before we actually dig in. My biases, right? My bias. I want to be as healthy as possible. I want to remove any misinformation. I want to make sure people aren't dying. And if I see something which has benefits so large, with some risk, yeah, I'm probably going to pick the benefits over that small risk. But this is not one of those cases. And in fact, let's dig into this. Let's watch the video, man. Should you drink raw milk? It's illegal, right? This is actually something one of my school community members sent me. I've watched this guy's channel before. He's not the worst. Obviously everything he says makes sense, and that's why people will follow it and give him praise, 159 comments. But it's just not really what the science says. And that's an important thing, right, guys? So let's take a look at this video, man.
For human consumption. It literally says on here, for intermittent feed used only for dogs and cats. But I've been drinking this for more than a year. I will tell you the story of raw milk. It's god tier benefits for hormonal function as well as gut health.
God tier, okay. God tier benefits for hormones and gut health. I know for a fact this isn't the case, but let's see if he built upon this.
I'll expose the demonization of raw milk by governmental organizations.
Exposing demonization? This is not some global conspiracy. This is something which gets recalled every single week for having some new bacteria strain outbreak, causing people to be sick and to end up on ventilators. No, I'm not fear-mongering. You're very lucky if you drink something like this and you get salmonella. You're lucky if you get something mild, because if you get something bad, it's game over, man. It really is life-changing. Like, I've spoken to people recently who have told me that they had one scare of like insane diarrhea, insane being weak for a week straight from this, and they've never touched raw milk since. Even if the 7 years prior they had no issues, because they got lucky. Because that is it. If your if your family members, if your uncle, if your aunt or whatever has not boiled this, has not pasteurized this, and has reached to a point where they haven't got sick, that is called being lucky.
And a certain mega corporation by the name of Monsanto. I'll give you my personal experience, teach you where to find this stuff. I'll also clear up the whole controversy between A1 and A2 milk. I'll give you the full milk tier list and tell you exactly which milks you should consider and which ones you should reject. That being said, everything in this video is my own personal views and my experience. This is not medical advice. See, most people don't know this, but drinking raw milk isn't even that risky. If you actually run the numbers and look at how many...
Isn't that risky? Okay, I've seen this before, so I actually know what he's going to point out. But I want to, before he says it, but before he gets that belief in your mind, I want you to ask yourself one question. Do you wash your salad? Do you wash your lettuce, your vegetables, and your fruit? Now let's see what he says.
How many people have actually died or gotten sick due to raw milk versus other foods in general? Raw milk doesn't really stand out as a massive public health hazard at all. I mean, think about lettuce. Every now and then you always hear this headline, people died or got sick because of an outbreak of E. coli in lettuce in like Chipotle or something. But there's no movement for banning lettuce. And yet, in many states, it's a felony to sell raw milk. The Industrial Revolution...
Okay, this is going way too fast. Let me actually slow it down a little bit for you guys, because I don't want you... it's just too fast, right? Like, if I can comprehend something in times 100 speed, doesn't mean you can.
of an outbreak of E. coli in lettuce in like Chipotle or something. But there's no...
Yes, the Chipotle lettuce. If they had washed their lettuce, would there have been an E. coli outbreak? No. This is why you have to wash your lettuce. Like, the idea of pasteurization is basically the same as washing your food. It's very, very similar. But let's continue to see what else is going on here.
No movement for banning lettuce, and yet in many states...
That's wild. A movement for banning lettuce? You know what? Ban unwashed lettuce. In fact, I'm pretty sure not washing your lettuce is something which is illegal. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure the food inspector came in, sees you with lettuce as like covered in dirt, you've got a few bugs in there, and you're just slapping it right into your food. I think they'd close you down. I really do, and there'd be a hefty fine along with that.
It's a felony to sell raw milk. The industrial...
It's a felony to sell raw milk, yeah. As it should be. Like, we talk about selling steroids being illegal, right? I don't know if it's a felony. Selling steroids, at least there is an actual benefit. There are a lot of risks, which are known. But with raw milk, it's like you're sold this lie about being some sort of superfood with superpowers, with zero risks, because some corporations just made the risks up.
The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race, and definitely for cows. As industrial plants grew and more people moved towards cities and got clustered in these claustrophobic cities, they brought their cows with them, and these cows, they were living under horrible, torturous conditions. And to be fair, the humans themselves were living in very bad conditions, so I understand it. But these cows were ridden with parasites, which is a separate topic. They were living with their own feces. They were living in extremely stressed environments, and so they were immunocompromised. And when they produced milk, yeah, this milk was not good for people, got them sick. And of course, the industry...
What? I see where he's going with this. I'll let him continue his point, and then we'll talk about why it's a load of rubbish.
The Industrial Revolution is always there for the rescue. The technique of pasteurization, which is nothing more than just heating the milk, basically kills the milk. It kills the milk. Milk is supposed to be a living food.
I think he puts this perfectly. It's nothing more than just heating the milk. That's kind of what it goes on. And we'll break into the living food thing, because that's a different point. But I do want to bring up one thing, right? Before doctors wash their hands, right? Before they wash their hands, there used to be this whole thing where they operate on the cadavers. They'd learn. They'd be in like the teaching side of the hospital, and then they go deliver babies, and the babies would die. The mother would die because their hands are covered in bacteria. And I've actually had a lot of people recently telling me that bacteria is not a cause for disease, and something else is going on. I'm like, no, you can't cause the global conspiracy. You can't reject science that much. Like, this is the equivalent of being a flat earther, I'm afraid. But when they started washing their hands, which although at the beginning was called like madness, it was called like lunacy, because they didn't see the idea or like why it would work, even though the death rates were going down heavily. When this happened, it meant that people touching cadavers weren't putting all that deathly bacteria onto people who were giving birth. Now, my question is, nowadays, hygiene's a lot better. Nowadays, the doctors aren't going from operating on cadavers to operating on someone else. So why would our doctors need to do the same thing? The conditions aren't as bad, so surely they don't need to worry about it because the bacteria isn't as bad. So like, this isn't an argument. This is like a ridiculous point. You can't say sometime in the past conditions were awful and there were much more bacteria and parasite and fungal in the milk, and now it's okay because there's less. Like, that's just not an argument, man.
Food. Milk has living organisms in it which actually aid in digestion and gut health. It has enzymes in it which actually help you to digest the milk. So when you pasteurize it, you lose the enzymes, you lose the living microbes, and you just have this dead liquid, which is chemically...
Okay, so the liquid is alive because of the enzymes. The enzymes are what make it easier to digest. Cool. So the thing about enzymes is, well, number one, our body creates all the enzymes that are in milk, which we use. So we don't need milk to create enzymes. That's not something we need. But two, enzymes will denature in acidic conditions, very acidic conditions, like a pH of, I think it's 1 to 3. And your stomach, right? Your stomach falls into the conditions where enzymes would be denatured. Meaning if you drink milk for the enzymes, for digestive benefits, the second they hit your stomach, they denature. They're not usable. And your body relies on the ones it makes. Nothing you eat, no enzyme you eat, you're using because your stomach is destroying it. So this is a non-point. Like, if you told someone, you can eat dead food, but if you eat living food, it's better because it's alive. And then you're like, well, the second it enters, it dies of like oxygen loss. They'd be like, oh yeah. But somehow, because it's milk, somehow we don't have that sort of belief, right? We're like, oh, it hits the stomach and it dies instantly. No, it's still being useful. I'm sure it's aiding in digestion, right? Because it's a living thing and we didn't kill it from pasteurization.
The same as raw milk, but biologically different. So speaking of pasteurization, I said that pasteurization essentially kills the milk. And this is exactly why a lot of people who are lactose intolerant, those who cannot buy and drink the store-bought milk, they are actually fine drinking raw milk. This is because raw milk actually is easier to digest because the bacteria in there and the enzymes in there actually make the body more able to actually digest the milk. I suppose it goes with...
Okay, this is not true. People who are lactose intolerant have one problem, and that problem is digesting lactose. Now, there is one enzyme which could potentially be beneficial. Now, of course, we're not able to get it from the milk, but if we had an enzyme inside the milk that could digest that lactose for us, what we'd get is we'd have a simple sugar, right? And we'd be able to digest that very, very easily because, you know, the lactose isn't there anymore, and people who have problems digesting lactose wouldn't have a problem. See, cool. If that existed, the thing about this is if you have lactose and lactase, which is the digestive enzyme for lactose, there's nothing else. What we actually get is we get a milk which would be broken down into that simple sugar. The enzymes would not stay around. The lactose and the lactase would basically cancel out. And what would that mean? That means that even when you're pasteurizing it, you still would have the same thing happening because it's happened before. So you'd end up pre and post pasteurization with a milk with zero lactase. And this is actually how they make lactose-free milk. They add that lactase, right, that the digestive enzyme of lactose to the milk, and they get left with the simple sugar. So this is just not true.
Without saying that raw milk is a probiotic, it helps the gut microbiome. And here's what happened in the grand scheme. So big farms which could afford the pasteurization equipment, they would pump out huge volumes of milk, and because they had increased the shelf life through pasteurization, they could drive down the cost, and they could therefore outcompete all the small farms which were making an honest day's living by giving you raw milk. And so today we end up in a situation where to buy raw milk can be challenging. Luckily,
Okay, this is awesome. And a couple of things were covered. The first I want to mention is probiotics. Now, we have a lot of probiotics. We have a lot of fermented foods. We have yogurts, we have kefir, we have even sour cream, right? We have a lot of things we can consume. And of course, there's some like the veggie-based ones where we have like pickled vegetables, we have sauerkraut. You know, the list goes on and on and on and on. Even cheese is going to be a probiotic, right? The thing about these, though, is if you compare how effective at being a probiotic they are compared to milk, it absolutely blows out the park. No one should be consuming milk to be a probiotic. It's just not worth it. It's like if I told you, oh yeah, get your protein from broccoli. You know, 100 grams of broccoli has more protein than 100 grams of steak. It's like, well, yeah, but you have to eat so much more of it because of the volume. And it's like, this is kind of what's going on here. See, when you make this argument, you're making it seem like every single time you consume something, every little tick box has to be higher than the other for it to be better. And when it comes to pasteurized, unpasteurized milk, sure, one is more probiotic alongside definitely bacteria, but we take pasteurized milk, we add the good bacteria, we let it culture, let it multiply to millions the size. That is an expression, don't quote me on that and say that I'm wrong, it's not millions the size. But then you end up with a product which has the exact same good bacteria, which the raw milk would have, but in much larger quantities where you're actually going to be able to use it. That is how milk becomes good for gut health, by turning it to cheese, by turning it to yogurt, by turning it to kefir, not by drinking it raw.
I have a solution for you. I'll teach you exactly where to get raw milk.
Without any milk.
But of course, the bigger problem is the artificial hormone issue, the RBST issue. So a lot of countries have banned RBST, but not the US though. So what happened here is there's a genetics company called Genentech, and they created this artificial hormone called RBST. And eventually Monsanto came to own the IP, the intellectual property for creating that stuff. And just understand this properly. So they take the cows, they inject them with this artificial hormone, which causes them to lactate more and therefore produce more milk. What this does to the cows is truly inhumane. It causes the cows' mammary glands, their breast tissue, to become overtaxed and diseased. These cows have a higher chance of going lame. These cows also have a weakened immune system, which now means that you have to pump these cows full of antibiotics to keep them alive. And this apparently is the more healthy option as compared to raw milk. And despite all this, the FDA says that milk with and without RBST are the same thing. And of course, I haven't even touched on the topic of xenoestrogens.
Okay, let's cover this. So I want to point out this is primarily coming from a place where I haven't heavily, extensively researched into RBST, other than the fact that cause and effect, right? Like take a group, give them RBST, take a group, give them RBST milk, free milk. It's the same. They get the same outcomes. There's no difference there. When it comes to being humane, yes, that is extremely inhumane. The practice of milking a cow in itself is inhumane. The process of giving it, growth hormone or some other stuff, all of that is wrong. I do not support the idea of that, but I don't think it's the right argument here, because we're not talking about raw milk versus RBST. We're talking about raw milk versus pasteurized milk. Now, if you want to take the path where you buy raw milk and then you boil it, right, you pasteurize it yourself, I think that's a pretty good thing, right? If you only have access to either raw milk or RBST milk, that's probably a net positive. If you have RBST-free pasteurized milk and then raw milk, it's a different question. If we're going to talk about the risks of something like RBST, which isn't really shown, and then we're going to drink something which is definitely shown to not be good, to have a vast amount of risks, then I don't really know what we're doing here.
Estrogens. It should be pretty obvious that the artificial hormone which literally causes cow to lactate more is a xenoestrogen. Xenoestrogens are basically estrogen-like compounds which will cause a man to get more feminine trait. And it's certainly not good for females either, because it essentially outcompetes with natural female estrogen and causes serious harm to the female reproductive system as well. So it's no joke. And it's certainly not the only hazard here. So
okay, let's cover xenoestrogens. This is a topic which is butchered. So if you want to learn more about this, genuinely go research it for yourself. But a majority of the time when someone says it's a xenoestrogen, it competes. Majority of the time, the effect is so minimal. That's why I say actually go do your research. Go see what it actually says. Because when you look at the data, you're going to realize it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's so small. This isn't 100 nanograms a deciliter of testosterone. This is like 1 or 2 nanograms a deciliter of testosterone. A lot of the times when you're biting the bullet with a xenoestrogen, you're having it because you're taking something else, which ends up creating a net positive effect. Imagine I take some vitamin D supplements. Everyone knows how great vitamin D supplementation is for testosterone. If I take that and it is in a plastic bottle or it has microplastics inside it, let's say that the microplastics are going to be damaging for my testosterone, but they're not damaging enough for the actual vitamin D I'm supplementing to be a net negative. And that's the thing here. Can we get plastic-free vitamin D? Yes. Can we get RBST-free milk? Yes.
grain-fed cows understand this. So grain is already a problem because grain gets moldy, and mold contains something called ZEA, which is a xenoestrogen. That's certainly a problem on itself, but there's even more to it. When cows eat grain instead of grass, they're rumens. The rumen is a part of the cow's digestive tract. It becomes more acidic than it's supposed to. And what that means is the E. coli, which might be present in the digestive tract, evolved to become acid resistant. Why is that problem for you? It's because your digestive system, the digestive system...
Oh, awesome. Acid resistant E. coli? Here's the thing. Acid resistant E. coli will spread to cows who do not have acid resistant E. coli, even if they're raw milk cows. So those cows are essentially all going to get E. coli. Now what happens when cows have E. coli, when the coli spreads to different places, even if they're not all raw milk cows, as we call them? It means that regardless of if your milk is pasteurized or unpasteurized, you're going to have E. coli, except pasteurized milk is gonna go through pasteurization and the E. coli is going to be killed. Cool.
Of humans is a pretty remarkable piece of equipment. Our digestive acids can destroy E. coli most of the time. But if you feed cows with grain and the E. coli in their gut becomes acid resistant, now that E. coli when it enters your gut is still acid resistant. And this is the stuff to actually make
you know what? He should have swapped this for talking about enzymes. Our stomach can digest enzymes unless they're acid resistant, which in the case of milk, they're not.
So that's why I get my milk from grass-fed cows producing raw milk. There was a farm in Maine which wanted to put on their milk bottles a label which said, "We don't use artificial hormones." And Monsanto came for them with their entire army of gremlinist, verminous lawyers because RBST is Jim, and only now slowly getting basically helps heal, and is it worth it? And the answer is definitely raw milk to consumers. And the CDC, which barely is milk, is a safer option. I find myself rejecting them. In a world where the government legalizes alcohol and weed and prohibits the sale of raw milk to consumers, and the CDC recognizes raw milk to be a public health hazard, I have...
Do you know why? I think if you research raw milk for a great deal of time and you realize the risks, you will understand why it is banned. Because the benefits are non-existent. And at least with drugs, you can see why there would be a societal benefit, at least for
very little patients. So the question becomes, is it worth it? And the answer is definitely yes. Definitely been worth it for me for two reasons specifically. One is the joint health reason.
No.
So raw milk contains something called Bolton factor, which basically helps heal and improve joint health. This was personally important to me because almost a year ago I took an injury to the right elbow and left knee, which really put me out of gym, and I'm only now slowly getting back into it. And then finally, of course, it got microbiome benefits, which are the easiest to understand. This stuff literally contains...
You're not going to get a steroid-like healing effect from drinking raw milk. I'm sorry. That's just not going to happen.
Live bacteria, which is why I will not leave this on the table for very long. I'll keep it in the fridge as soon as this video is done. And finally, we come to the actionable steps. I'm going to break down exactly how, where, and when.
He even understands how risky it is to have the milk on the table and talks about adding it back. That is like, that's one of those Freudian slip moments when you're like, I should not have this out, right? The bad bacteria is multiplying a very large amount. Let me throw it back in the fridge. Like, you can't throw this in your video about talking how it's safe.
when to consume this milk, right? So the easiest way to get milk, like how I get it, is from a local grocery market. So just literally search on Google organic grocery near me, and you'll often find where I live. So if you don't search
I don't think I really care about how to get real milk. I am not getting it. I have tried it, yes, but anyone who's going to talk about, oh, have you tried it?
for it, you're not gonna find it. I'll link in the description. A1 versus A2 milk. What's up? That entire controversy about? All right, now I'll make it super simple for you. I'm not gonna waste your time. A2 milk is good. A1 milk is bad. So it all comes down to the breed of cow which produces it and the protein structure in the milk itself. So when A1 milk is digested, it can break down in some people into something called BCM7, which is an inflammatory substance. And not only that, it even seems to have an effect on opioid receptors. Yes, weird stuff. Now, not everybody reacts the same way. For you, it may not matter. For me, I just want to keep it safe. A2 is more digestible, so I'm just going to go for A2 for having choice. If you're getting raw milk from a farm, you can actually ask them what breed of cow they use, and you can just Google it and find out what kind of milk they produce. In the US, it's mainly two breeds: Holstein and Jersey cows. Jersey cows produce A2, Holstein cows produce A1. So you want to look for Jersey cows if you can find them. And finally, we must discuss chocolate milk. Chocolate milk, as you know, comes from brown cows and is known to increase testosterone by 69.69%. But for real though, so raw milk actually contains a lot of CLA, which is conjugated linoleic acid, which does actually improve testosterone. And I have some good news. So the tide is turning, and I see this in real life. So 1 year ago, when I started purchasing raw milk from the little grocery store I mentioned, they would often just run out of raw milk because so many people were coming and grabbing them, which tells me there's a demand growing for this stuff, and there's an awareness growing about raw milk. And what happened was, nowadays they don't run out of milk because the farm which produces it had enough money, enough resources to purchase more cows. So it's happening right now, boys. So this movement of moving towards natural foods is happening right now. And I want you to capitalize on this. I want you to create businesses which literally produce better stuff. You don't have to invent anything new. Just produce better stuff, more natural, less toxic stuff, and just watch your business grow over the next 5-10 years. In the description. Now I'm going to tell you which milks are worth consuming. On the top, the king, we have, of course, raw milk, not pasteurized, not homogenized, and this can be either cow milk or goat milk or sheep milk or camel milk if you find.
Top of the top of the range, pasteurized milk, baby. You know what? Add in some vitamin D. Pasteurized milk with added calcium, added vitamin D, added vitamin A. Boom. That would be absolutely beautiful. And alongside that, some cheese. That is top tier milk.
That's the highly esoteric option. If you have freaking camel milk, then good for you, man. Below that, you have something called low temperature pasteurized, non-homogenized. This is something you find in some grocery stores, not all of them, but it's also a good option. I would 100% recommend that. And I should note that the both options I mentioned so far, I assume that they are grass-fed, grass-finished. Then we start moving on to the options which I don't consume. Pasteurized, ultra-pasteurized, stuff in the cartons. So let me explain this. So milk that you find in cartons in your grocery store, that's not just pasteurized, that's ultra-pasteurized. At that point, I would consider it just to be another processed food, and I would dismiss it. And then even lower than that, we have skim milk. So you have the 2%, 1%, and skim milk. At that point,
okay, I don't understand why people talk about skim milk, because obviously it has less fat. There's a reason people have it, because they're probably trying to get a low-calorie, lower fat option. Maxing out your fat isn't ideal. When it comes to these milks though, yes, there will be nutrient loss, which they account for by adding the nutrients back in.
like, why? Why would you drink such a thing? That's barely even milk. So yeah, that's an easy rejection. And under that, we have, of course, the nut milks and soy milks. Why would anybody drink something literally called nut milk? Just based on name alone, I would not consume such a thing. Of course, bottom of a barrel, we have your soy milk. So really, you don't even have that many options. And of course, I should just have a disclaimer.
Milk, nut milk, based. Absolutely based, man.
We're saying none of this is a dietary recommendation. If you don't have access to this, I would suggest going and getting kefir.
Wait, I do need to add on a disclaimer. No, neither will destroy your testosterone. Neither will duplicate your estrogen to the roof.
Instead, kefir is a fermented product, and I should
Bro, I spoke about this earlier. This is what you want for your gut health. This is what you want for probiotics.
say fermented products across the board are really good. One, for the microbiome benefits, but also because fermentation itself destroys estrogens. So you can find buttermilk, yogurt, kefir, all these are good options.
What's for me? Yeah, bash.
So first, I'm gonna have to shake this thing. This is non-homogenized milk, which means that the cream will basically float at the top. So open this up, pour myself some raw milk, purchased literally just today. So question, how does raw milk taste? Raw milk tastes rich. It tastes velvety. It tastes a little bit sweet too, because this is the first day, right? This is literally the first day I got it. So it contains a lot of the sugar still in there. So it tastes wonderful. And it even has a little chunks of cream in it, which makes it even more delectable. But every day that passes, the bacteria is going to consume some of the sugar, so it'll lose some of its sweetness, which is fine. It's still nutritious. But I'm just pointing it out because it's not that your milk is going bad, it's just that some of the sugar is being consumed. And raw milk will stay.
Thank you for watching. If you want to join my community and point out stuff like when you see stuff like this, or you want to ask some more questions, or ask it all further about real milk, have a discussion about it, or share some studies about anything that was covered today, then the link will be in the description. It's a free community. You can come and join, and you can do whatever you want, apart from bad stuff and evil stuff and not good stuff.